Hello kids, this is Mr. Whistler with your video lesson of the day. And today we're going to be talking about the Lincoln and Douglas debates and the raid on Harpers Ferry. We have three vocab words today. Our first one is arsenal. The official, a storage place for weapons and ammunition. A place to store your guns and bullets. Keeps arms safe while not being used. Our second word is martyr. A person who sacrifices his life for a principle or a cause. Dies for a belief. Can inspire people to fight for that cause. And our third word is bias. A tendency to think a certain way. When your ideas about something influences your opinion, your bias can influence others to think the way you do. All right, in 1858, Stephen A. Douglas and Abraham Lincoln ran against each other for the United States Senate seat from Illinois. This is Stephen A. Douglas, and he was the current senator, so he was running for re-election. He was also considered as a presidential candidate in 1860. He was a short, little, stocky guy, and his nickname was the Little Giant. Remember, he had been in the Senate for a number of years. He was the author of the Compromise of 1850 and the Kansas-Nebraska Act, and he was pretty well known. He was a successful lawyer, and he was against slavery, but he thought the slavery issue could be solved through popular sovereignty, or letting the people decide by voting. Now, Abraham Lincoln was the Republican, and this is what he looked like before he was president. He was a newcomer, and he was also a successful lawyer, and he was against slavery also. But he did not think that slavery should be allowed to be spread. So, Stephen A. Douglas, when you talked about slavery, he thought popular sovereignty could solve it. And Lincoln was also against slavery, but he did not think it should be spread. Now, in 1858, Lincoln challenged Douglas to a series of debates. And Douglas really didn't want to do it. He had everything to lose. He was popular. People knew him. He had been in the Senate and in Congress. And if he screwed up in these debates, then his popularity could only go down because he was pretty popular. Well, he couldn't say no either, because if he said no, then that would make him look weak. So he reluctantly agreed, and they planned 7 debates in 7 different cities. And the main topic of the Lincoln-Douglas debates was slavery. So the Freeport Debate was when Douglas made a mistake. And Lincoln asked Douglas if people of a territory could legally exclude slavery before statehood, or could the people of a territory not have slavery or vote not to be a slave state before they became a state. So if you'll remember, before states become states, they're always territories, and the main criteria for a territory to become a state is they have to have 50,000 people. So once again, the question that Lincoln asked, can people of a territory legally exclude slavery before statehood? And Stephen A. Douglas thought about it for a second. He said, yeah, all they have to do is refuse to pass laws that protect slaveholders' rights. And that was his mistake, because as soon as the Southern people heard his response, probably the only thing they heard is, refused to protect slaveholders' rights, and they automatically didn't like Stephen A. Douglas. This became known as the Freeport Doctrine, so they gave it a name, and they referenced it all the time. So this kind of hurt Douglas a little bit. Well, Douglas went on the offensive after that and accused Lincoln of wanting African Americans to be fully equal to whites, which just wasn't done at that time period. Well, Lincoln denied this and responded by saying, "In the right to eat bread which his own hand earns, an African American is my equal and the equal of Senator Douglas and the equal of every living man." And I just thought this quote shows the greatness of Lincoln right from the very beginning, before he barely gets started. He's in a debate. He has to come up with this off the cuff. And to be able to do that, you probably have to draw from your beliefs. And I think Lincoln really believed this. He believed in the Declaration of Independence, where it says, we're all born with unalienable rights like life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And he's talking about life right here. Everybody's equal that works hard for their money and use their money to survive. So he also said the real issue is between the men who think slavery a wrong and those who do not think it wrong. The Republican Party thinks it wrong. So Douglas ends up winning this election. It was close, but he ends up winning. But Lincoln established himself as a political power, and he gained national attention and popularity. So in 2 years, when he runs for president, people will know who he is. All right, John Brown back on the scene. And remember, to review, he thought that God had told him to end slavery. So he gets a bunch of men together, 18 white and black men, and they decide to attack the town of Harpers Ferry, Virginia, and raid the armory that's there. His plan was to take ammunition and weapons and start a rebellion by arming the slaves. This is the armory at Harpers Ferry and a painting of the attack. Well, he was quickly defeated by the federal troops, the army that was there guarding the armory, and he was convicted of treason and murder, and he was executed. So some thought Brown's actions made him a traitor. Now, who would think that this would make him a traitor? That would be the South. And others considered him a martyr. And remember, a martyr is someone who dies for a cause. So probably the North, or at least some abolitionists, probably thought this. Now, this attack on Harpers Ferry, this armory, was kind of a big deal because the South had been thinking a long time that the North was in a conspiracy to overthrow their way of life. And this event kind of proved it for them, kind of confirmed the fact that the North's out to get them. So whether the North was or they weren't, in the Southern person's mind, when they heard the news of John Brown's raid and he had planned on arming the slaves, they were like, see? Oh, we told you the North was out to get us. They're out to ruin our way of life. So in their minds, they're on the verge of secession. They don't want to deal with this anymore. They don't think they can trust anybody in the North. They definitely can't trust the Republicans. So the country is on the brink of disaster. All right, now here is a picture of John Brown going to his execution. He's leaving the courthouse, and he walks down the steps, and you can see he's kissing a baby right here. Now here is an example of bias, and I'm going to read a quote, and I want you to see if you can find the bias in the quote. Now, when we're looking for bias, what you want to do is you want to try to filter out all the flowery language and just get right to the point. An example would be the Dallas Cowboys, the greatest team to ever play football with all the greatest players, are in the NFL. Well, that statement shows a lot of bias because I like the Dallas Cowboys. Well, what's the original question? The Dallas Cowboys are in the NFL, but I throw all that other stuff in there to kind of sway your opinion because I'm biased. Well, John Brown does, this writer writing about this incident does the same thing. So see if you can find it. As he stepped out of the door, a black woman with a little child in her arms stood near his way. He stopped for a moment in his course, stooped over, and with the tenderness of one whose love is as broad as the brotherhood of man, kissed the child affectionately. Now this is from the story, The Execution of John Brown, in the Anglo-African magazine, December 1859. So the first question I have is, what does this writer make John Brown sound like? And the kids today said it made him sound like a good guy, but what is he really? He's a murderer. And then what is he telling them that he did? The basic message is John Brown bent over and kissed a child. So what's the bias? And with the tenderness of one whose love is as broad as the brotherhood of man, shows the bias. So the bias in favor of John Brown by the writer of this passage is demonstrated by, and with the tenderness of one whose love is as broad as the brotherhood of man. All right, kids, that is your lesson for the day. Today's blog is, what was the main topic of the Lincoln-Douglas debates? And the answer is, as you know, slavery. Thanks, kids, and have a great day.